Welcome to the Business Spotlight Podcast. My name is Kay Cote, and I'm your host for today's episode. And today on the show, I have Jan Bozarth, founder and CEO of Aventurine Studio One. We're going to be learning about her business, her journey to business ownership, best practices, and challenges that she's faced to give you that inside look to what it's like to build and operate a business. So nice to meet you, Jan. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Kay.
Of course. But before we dive into all things business, I'd love to learn a little bit about you. So take us back as far as you want. Share a bit about yourself.
I am a mom and a grandmom and a musician and a songwriter and now a book writer. But I started most of this in music. My whole background is really in the music business and then eventually becoming a songwriter in my own right and working that whole side of the equation. But the business that I have now is really the evolution of all my own artistry, from songwriting to game production and game design to writing books. And I didn't start writing books until about 15 years ago because I didn't see the kinds of books for young girls, which is my target market, like 8 to 15-year-old girls. I didn't see the kinds of things in the market that I would have liked to see. So I started writing those kinds of books and added that to my repertoire. So Aventurine Studio One is the culmination of all of that in my career, with the songs and the books, the stories, the games as well, and all that goes with that.
That is incredible. And it is so touches my heart personally because when you said songwriter, that's something I've recently just picked up and getting back to my roots of music. So I'm very excited for this conversation because it's like music really is a way to share so much with the world. So I'm really excited. That's really cool.
Sorry about that. So yeah, no, I mean, and we live in Austin, of course, and Austin is a great music town. And we moved here from Houston many years ago when our children were little. But I was in the record business then, in the recording industry. And so we moved to Austin, and I had 3 little boys, and I just started really just applying what I knew about music to my children's lives as they grew up. And I really had an idea of what children's music should be like. So it used to be baby music, toddlers, right? But I saw all music as children's music. And so my boys were brought up learning to play instruments, all stringed instruments, in the Suzuki method. And they're all professional musicians now. And so our whole life was really wrapped around music in some way or shape or form.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'm very excited to dive into how you started your current company. So was there a moment in when you were like working through your career in music? Like how did you come about what you're doing now?
When I was songwriting, I really started from poetry and journal writing. I just loved writing. And my songs were always stories. And so I was really writing stories in different forms from the beginning. And then I got more into digital product production, which was also storytelling, which I also most often I would write the songs for those. I had a long run with Mattel, producing Barbie and other some of their bigger brands and writing pop songs for girls in that form. And in those days, nobody really knew how big music would be inside of games, right? It was just the beginning of time. So I had a lot of opportunity along the way, but it kind of helped me shape my personal artistic output. And at the point where I started writing the books that are currently out, I was sick of working for other people doing their bidding. I just decided to break away and write a series of books for young girls that were like something I would like to read, very beautiful and soulful. And most people weren't making things like that, especially in Hollywood. They were making poppy things, but they weren't necessarily making soulful things. So I took the risk. I wrote one book and designed a 12-book series behind it, got a big publishing deal from Random House, an 8-book deal with them, which is a huge deal for a first-time writer. but they gave me that deal based on my career before that with working with young kids and specifically girls. So, I had a big career before I really broke off and made my own company. And I had little companies along the way, like a production studio that serviced my work with Mattel. But this was really all built on my creative output. And I started the company with the 6 books, with the first 6 books of Random House. And then I got breast cancer and I had to stop everything. And eventually we, negotiated the close of that company while I was in chemo. So the current company, a little known fact, is during that time when we closed the company, I was able to buy back all my rights to my books. So when
Mm,
I started coming out of that, it took me 4 years in treatment, 2 near-death experiences. It was a big deal. Uh,
mm,
but what happened next was what shaped what we're doing now. And that is I came out of that. I didn't really go out into the world to work right away. I just started writing new books. And a lot of people came to me and said, what are you going to do with the 6 books you already have? And I said, I don't know. But what I ended up doing is really working on this, on the world building that I started with the first 6 books, and then writing a whole new book series and aged it up. And it had that common world with the first 6 books. So I have now 8 books going on 9. So there's 6 in the Fairy Godmother Academy series that I'm re-releasing right now. And then
mhm.
a new series is called Coded for Greatness, and it's for young teens, boys and girls. And I'm about to put out the second book in that series. So I I built the business around that. I had put in many, many, many years into that work. And I thought, well, I'm going to start a new company. I'll expand the brand. I'll build a brand basically instead of just books. Designed a Roblox game with a team and just started building the business of Aventurine Studio One around that content. And it's vast. It's a big undertaking for one human being and a team. Most of my team is not local. I have a couple of people in Austin, but I've got contractors and partnerships all over the world. So I'm building a global brand out of the thing that I started from nothing. And, right now we're in that scary moment. We've been in business 2.5 years. We're getting ready to take on partners, financial partners and distribution partners and things like that. So that's where it is right this minute. But it was a big undertaking and probably not one I would have chosen to do had I not had my 4 years of cancer and not knowing where I was going to go after that.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing about that. You said many things that really, I kind of was like putting little pins in. I was like, oh, I want to go back to that. So one of the things you mentioned was, coming out of your previous career and going into starting your own business. Was there anything, or what was it that helped you? Maybe like the skills you learned, was there anything specific that really helped pave the way for creating your own business?
Well, I was always entrepreneurial. And when you work as a contractor to a big company like Mattel or Disney, I was I was running a little shop, that was the skills that I had as they applied to these bigger companies. So in a way, I was always running my own business. It was just that it serviced something bigger. The real risk was going full bore on my own creative ideas and just putting all, my eggs in that basket and not relying on a big existing entity to make that happen. And that was super risky for me. But I
Mm,
was so determined that there wasn't anything in the world like I really wanted to see for the kids. I mean, and in the context of getting into the game business and being involved with the big studios, I ran a little company in Austin called Girl Games. I say I ran it, I was second in command, but I did all the creative for that and had a team of people. And those were some of the first games that were ever created for girls. And I cut my teeth on early stage game development. And part of my deal, and you'll understand this if you're a budding songwriter, was okay, I'll do all that, but I also want to get my songs in these products. So it was a
mm,
way for me to kind of co-launch my songwriting career. And in the children's media world, songwriting itself, or music, it's really just pop music. It's not little baby music. It's songs that you hear on the radio. So I knew it was a good avenue. So I was entrepreneurial in the fact that even in my corporate jobs, I tried to position myself and make sure that I was getting the best in the things that I wanted out of that. So that was very successful. Millions of songs, millions of kids, that kind of thing. And defined in some ways a new wave of what we called children's music, because we just sort of lumped all children into one age group. But I was writing for young teens, basically, preteen and young teens.
Yeah, that's powerful how that's the golden nugget of this conversation is how you were able to get more out of one thing. You were able to like set yourself up for success with other things within one. I think that's really huge for especially for anybody as an entrepreneur.
That's right. I was very, I knew what I wanted all along. Even if I had a corporate job to get a paycheck for whatever, right? I knew what I wanted out of that job. And I think a lot of people do this. They'll take a big job with a big company, but their focus is on the things they want to develop for themselves. And that's a lot easier now with, startup businesses and entrepreneurial world, basically. So, but I was very clear on what I wanted. I used to say, and I said this out loud in whatever event I was in, is it was all an elaborate plan to write songs, right? How do you get your songs into the market, especially if it's not a genre that's well known? And I had a very famous president of a very famous record company say to me once, he was in charge of children's music for a big label. And he goes, I don't know, they just made me in charge of it, but I don't even know what children's music is. Now, this is a record label, right? So that was the world that I was entering, is nobody even knew what to call it. They didn't know what it was. They didn't have the promise of the youth market being the biggest purchasers of all time, right? That was before all that. So I just knew where I was going all along and just carved my little path all the way through. And that is not to say that everything was successful, including the time I had to take off from being sick. So this is the big risk now. Aventurine Studio One represents about 15 years of my life, and in creative life and business life and personal life. And I'm, as far as I can tell right now, I'm taking it to its destiny and whatever that means. So there's a lot riding on it, and there's a lot riding on me in taking this risk.
Definitely. Well, looking at too, you mentioned your team. That's another part of the conversation I want to go back to is your team that's helping you. So, how many team members are you currently at, both here and remote?
I have like 3 or 4 people in Austin. I mean, some of them, like the website people, will come and go depending on our needs, but I have some close people. And what's interesting for me is that my 2 closest people, they're all women that work with me. I've worked with off and on in different companies for 30 years. These are people I know, they know me, they trust me. And so it wasn't hard to get, committed people to help me do this dream. But I have people in Germany, I have people in London, and just individuals who come in and do a particular thing. Like my person in Germany is the book designer. So I mean, I think it's a pretty easy thing nowadays to be in the digital world, to be in different countries with working with different people. You just have to learn the area that you're working in.
Oh, definitely. So, what's your total number for team members then?
When we were designing the website and getting ready to design the game, I think our total was like 20 people. And I typically stay around that size. I don't want it to be huge, it's not in terms of numbers of people, because I manage that, and I'm doing a lot of things. But
Mhm.
this year, with the grace of God and new funding, we will grow that a little bit, and start to develop the distribution outlets and things like that, licensing, things that will help us grow it.
Definitely. And looking at, that leads me perfectly to talk about like marketing your products, your books. How are you currently marketing?
Well, we're really not doing much marketing yet. We re-released, we're starting now, like currently this day, we're starting to re-release the redesigned Fairy Godmother Academy books that came out with Random House, and I got those back. I redesigned them. I added new content to those. So those are just now coming out. And then the new series, Coded for Greatness, the first two books will be out in the next month. So what we'll do, I mean, and also marketing changes, and it's changed dramatically with the times, but right now what we do is we try to build vertical, groups of people or young people that like this something about the work. They're either like a fairy core dressers and they like to read fairy stories or something that relates to us. So it's really building a fan base, probably 1,000 people at a time. I do have some super fans that were kids when my first books came out 10 years ago, and they're now in their early 20s, and I run into them all the time, which is really fantastic. So we'll engage our super fans, they're in their 20s, and ask them to talk about the new books and the new works. And then we also have a strong fashion component, which we've always had. Fairy Godmother Academy had its own, cosplay line, and this one will be more street fashion, just with a spin. Uh, we'll work those areas, fashion and music, too.
Oh,
And
that's really fun. I'm like,
it's
I would have as a young girl totally been into this. Like I'm in my 30s, but I it's magical. It's fun and it's
magical. That's true. And speaking of fans being into it and being our biggest promoters, we on our website, which is intoaventurine.co. Maybe you can put that in the notes, but we've just got the launch version of that site, but it's a pretty expansive site. But what we're going to be doing is building a creative council of kids. And when they sign up, and they have to have their parents' permission if they're under 13, um, when they sign up, what they get to do is they get to help us design things, and they can, A/B test things. So it's market testing with the target market. And there's fashion and music and gaming and, features and all kinds of things and fun things. I started testing this last year, and I'm getting ready to do the second Comic-Con. And at Comic-Con, we do workshops where we let the kids design their own characters or do things that they're basically contributing to the brand itself, so they can feel they have some ownership in that. So that's part of our marketing plan. And then just all the normal stuff, like I do a lot of appearances, Comic Cons, Fairy Cons, bookstores. Not so much bookstores anymore, but I did a lot of those in the past. I go to international book fairs, like the Texas Book Festival, but I went to Frankfurt and London and places like that. So I do an international appearance thing, and that's pretty much it. You're just on the road talking to people, and that's actually the best way to get to know my fans, is to go and see them. And
definitely.
it's really fun for me. I like that part. So
That's really fun that because that also makes me think of other creative markets like music and artists who are touring and things and um yeah, like I'm super excited. Where do you see the company going to in the next 3 to 5 years?
3 to 5 years, as long as I'm standing, I'll be doing probably not all the things I just named, because we won't be a startup anymore, but um, I'll do a lot of the appearance parts of it. I think that just being personally in touch with the fans is huge. But of course, hopefully the company will be running itself. There'll be more people and they'll be doing all the day-to-day stuff. I think eventually someone will try to buy us. There's a having this deep of content that's continuous, like it has a lot of legs. There's a lot of places for that to go. Like I have some people talking to me now about web comics, which is like comic books on the web. Basically, they're big in Asia, but not necessarily so big here yet. There's all kinds of new formats that are coming out, not necessarily AI, but AI background functionality, AI created, I should say. We want to own our content. We want to be in charge of the message. And the message in the Aventurine brand is to know yourself and to take back the power. If you think about a young girl online doing anything, gaming or anything, losing your power to someone else and not knowing yourself is not a good place to be. So there's a big elaborate story around knowing yourself, but it is really about knowing yourself, believing in your dreams, trusting the future, all of the things that we know that kids are going to need going forward.
That's setting themselves up for like success in life. And that's really, really, I love that. So kind of looking at what is a challenge you're faced, because as business owners, many of us are struggling because it's a lonely place. It can be like a scary place because you're just doing this thing. You're leading a team through something new. What is something you're currently challenged with?
Having too much to do for one living human being as a start. Also, I'm out in the front lines raising money, so I'm doing both the creative and the business for now. Uh, I am displaced from my creative life to some degree because I have to do the business, right? So that I think will evolve over time. But the biggest challenge for me as a business is being a female business owner raising money because I don't know, you might know the statistics on that, but they're not good. And this is a hard time, socially and in the global market. So I think you have to be very strong. You have to go into places that you may or may not be successful, and you can't
Mhm.
have too much of a soft approach because it doesn't get you anywhere. So I have raised money before successfully, and I will do it again, continue to do it because entrepreneurs typically have to do that, right? But I,
Mhm.
I find that the most challenging part.
Yes, I see that too, and especially as a female in business and growing. That's a truth. Is there anything that you're implementing currently, whether it be systems, processes, or anything to help as to get through those roadblocks?
Yes, of course. I mean, there's so many new tools too, especially with AI. You every day it's a new thing to learn and ask yourself, does this work for me? And so I'm not just using those tools, but I'm discovering them, right? But I'm in a lot of networks like LinkedIn, and I have a lot of people, friends in the business, and so they turn me on to things that could be helpful and make my productivity better. But um, sometimes it's just the old fashioned way too. You may have an AI bot, but at the end of the day, you still make decisions.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that would be my biggest thing. And then always meeting new people. I'm always trying to find perfect fits. And I didn't really design the company to be mostly or all female, but it's turned out that way because I've built a network of female entrepreneurs, and that's fun. And I love that part of it. But I also talk to guys, that are good at what they do and like the message.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. This has been such a great conversation. And before we wrap up, I'd like to dive into a few rapid fire questions where I ask you a question and you answer very top of mind.
Okay.
All right. So, Jan, question number one is, what is the key to success for you?
Never giving up. I don't give up easily. And if finding an alternate route if you need to, and pivoting and all of those things.
Very true. I love that. Number two is, what is a piece of advice you have for other business owners?
I think go into it with open eyes. Don't get too rigid. You think you have a plan, but that plan is going to change many times over the course of your life, and I think, or the life of the business. And to be flexible and open and to remain open and not get too married to that initial plan.
Very true. Number three is, this will be a fun one for you. What is a book or a piece of content or a podcast, anything that you've taken in that's resonated with you?
I've been talking a lot about a book I read a couple of years ago called The Master and His Emissary. It's Ian McGilchrist is the author. It's a big fat book about the brain, right? And,
Oh.
And yeah, I was thinking it was, and it is more or less about the right and left brain, the master being the right brain, the emissary being the left brain. But it's really more than that. It is about how our world has been dominated and ruled by the left brain, which is logic and systems and all the things that we know. And that's hurting us as humans. So I'm always thinking about when I'm making something for a young person, I'm thinking about they are the ones that are going to save the world. They need to be better than us, right? And so the master and his emissary is giving me ways to think about how to open up the right brain. And we always say, oh, well, we all need to be more creative. Creativity is the number one skill set in corporate America now, just making sure people can change as they go and be creative. We used to think of creativity as only the arts, but I think of creativity as the future. And how are we going to dream the future? How are we going to create, innovate, and do the things that need to be done? So that's my favorite book. I go back to it and I think about the implications of that.
Definitely. Wow. I just wrote that one down too. I'm going to put that on my reading list.
It's a big fat book. You'll have to take, it may take 2 years to get through it, but it is really interesting. And, it was for me.
I like it. I like it. And the final question is, if you could wave a magic wand and overnight improve one aspect of your business, what would it be?
Oh, the barrier to entry for girls and women. Or women in particular. All the women entrepreneurs that I know have something to say about being blocked in some way, money or access or whatever. And we think we've done well. We've moved along on a path as women, but there's still a lot of barriers. And sometimes women just give up because it's just too hard. They have families and husbands or whatever they have to do besides being an entrepreneur. So yes, I would remove all barriers for women and just make them rule the world.
This has been inspiring.
So, okay, well, thanks.
Yes, well, before we wrap up, I know you mentioned your website earlier, but feel free to share again how people can get in touch with you and your business online.
Yes, so into INTO, Aventurine, 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 which is a stone, a type of stone, .co, Intoaventuring.co is the website for the project, for the brand. It's our first launch of that. So it's, it doesn't have all the features yet, but it's a pretty high level site. And then they can contact me through the contact page on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for our final question today, what is most inspiring to you today?
Today, as in this day, or
However you want, yeah, however you want to take it. If it's today or if it's like in general.
I, I mean, I go back to the word resilience. Resilience is my superpower. So I always want to um, work on it for myself and help other people, young people, work on it. If people come to me for mentoring, which they do a lot, being resilient means you're alive. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. It means you're alive. So that's what I would work on for today. That's the word I would work with.
Well, Jan, thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. It's been such a joy to talk to you today.
Thank you, Kay. Thanks for having me.